Hi everyone, hope you guys are all having a great day today. In today's video, it's going to be relatively quick for the most part. I'm going to be covering the Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P 500, including the economic calendar. Now, I do post these videos daily, so I highly encourage you to double check the latest video on my channel, so that way you get the most up-to-date information. And I'm going to go over the economic calendar first before I get to the technical analysis portion. And for Wednesday, August 28th, 2024, at 1:15 a.m., we have Fed Governor Christopher Waler's speech in India on payments. At 6 p.m., we have Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic speech. One thing to note, though, at the end of the trading week, Friday, August 30th, 2024, we have PCE inflation numbers coming out, which is highly regarded as more accurate versus CPI and PPI inflation numbers for the Fed. Again, they look at more for the most part core PCE inflation numbers, but I've seen it go back and forth in terms of what's a better narrative. But it doesn't even matter because we have the Fed basically stating that in September rate cuts will be coming. Essentially, for the most part, 25 basis points. They're assessing the data and so on and so forth. And Jerome Powell, in the latest speech, stated that now is the time to see rate cuts moving forward. So there's that. Now, the market is anticipating Nvidia earnings coming out tomorrow, which is a mega cap stock. And the movement is to be plus or minus $300 billion in terms of the stock price movement. So that's going to be massive for the market in a way. Again, they are reporting at Wednesday, after the trading bell, and basically for the most part what I'm looking at is in terms of MACD lines, movement, and so on and so forth. It looks like the market will pretty much be doing what it did today in terms of being at standstill consolidation for the most part within the zones I'm going to be showing, and essentially waiting for the earnings for Nvidia. Now they are expected to beat the earnings expectations. The only thing is, though, the market's waiting to see what they'll forecast moving forward and hopefully beat expectations as well. But at the same time, expectations are on the high side, just FYI. So first I'm going to look at the S&P 500. Then I'm going to go to Dow Jones and Nasdaq and so on and so forth. And again, the MACD lines are kind of indicating to the downside potentially. But again, I'm not expecting crazy movements personally, even though they're showing downside, because I think the market's just waiting for Nvidia earnings to see what's going to happen. Because it pretty much will indicate if there's going to slow down or not, because they're predominantly not destroying, but more for the upside for AI technology. So if there's a slowdown, then technically there could be a slowdown for growth, potentially. But again, like always, it's just my opinion. So please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. Mind you, for SPY, which is an ETF for S&P 500, closed at $561.56. The SPY is just an ETF for S&P 500, so just a different ratio, same thing. And essentially for the top portion has to pass the all-time highs. I don't expect that to happen tomorrow because Nvidia, again, unless it starts having a run-up before earnings, I don't expect that to happen. I think where it's at right now, about $128, $129, $127, give or take, it just keeps fluctuating around there. It doesn't pass the 130 for the most part. It does pass it, but slightly, and gets pulled back down. So I don't expect Nvidia to have a run-up before earnings because it would have already had it by now. And hypothetically, it already had a run-up before earnings for the past few trading weeks, because essentially you could have bought the share at somewhere between $90 to $100, give or take, and easily bought it within the $100 to $110 price point and went up to $130. So we had pretty much a 30% run up for the past few trading weeks, if you could look at it that way. So everything's potentially priced in, hypothetically. So for the upside for the SPY, which is an ETF for the S&P 500, has to pass the previous all-time highs, which is the all-time highs in general. You can look at right about here. So we're pretty much at the all-time highs, and that is give or take about $563 and some change to $564 and some change. And if you want to count the pre-market and after hours, then you're looking at $565 and some change. That's for the upside. Now to the downside, pretty much hovering on the same price point. So moving average is about 560 and some change, and then you could check it out basically off this zone, which is 557 and some change, 558 and some change. I don't potentially expect it to go lower. If it does, I'm expecting to go within this zone right about here, which is about 556 and some change and 555 and some change. In my opinion, that is the ultimate lowest I'm expecting for Wednesday trading day to be going. I don't expect it to be going any lower. It might dip down slightly to 554 and some change because around here, but that was more based off the moving average. Personally, I don't expect to go lower than that. Again, unless it starts crashing, and I don't expect that because I don't expect Nvidia to be crashing before earnings reporting. Now for Nasdaq, which I'm going to be looking at ETF QQQ, which is an ETF for Nasdaq. Again, same thing, just different ratio. Mind you, closed at $476.76. And essentially same play for the most part, consolidation within the zone, and that is basically about $475 and some change. Could drop down to the moving average, which is about 471 and some change. I don't expect anything lower than that personally, but if it does go horrendous, but then the S&P, you could argue, would be horrendous too if it were to drop down significantly. You're looking at 465 and some change, and then within this zone, which in my opinion would hold for the most part, but it would be about 460 and some change. I don't expect to see the zone at all, to be honest, in my opinion. I think just more consolidation, just waiting for the earnings to come out. But for the upside, this is an upward, this line right about here, where we've seen the limits for the most part for the past few trading days. This is an upward trend resistance line dating back since 2010. If I zoom out, you'll see it. Since 2010, it's, mind you, the market has been going up. It doesn't mean the market's not going up, but it's just more been stuck between this and then still going up. And then every single time it went up, it would just get knocked down for the most part. Yeah, a couple false breakouts potentially. And then a full breakout since 2020 to 2022. Came back underneath it, tried to test it again, got knocked down, and then went up, did pass it, but then we came back underneath it again. So this is the past phase that I was talking about just as a recent, and then came back underneath it, and you can see we haven't been having issues to pass it. So issues passing it, false breakouts, and then issues passing it again. This was within the trading day, not pre-market, mind you. So again, if we do go to the, for the most part, if we go to the upside, I'm expecting the moving averages causing issues about the 479 and some change. Essentially by the time we get there, it'll be 480 and some change. And then the ultimate test would be the upward trend resistance line dating back since 2010, which would be about $484 and some change. I would say we could potentially go up to this zone right about here where it's the limits, about 487 and some change. But the thing is though, given Nvidia earnings, I don't expect to run up right now because the run up has been happening for the past few trading weeks, pricing in a bunch of things for Nvidia share. And then the ultimately basically staying within the zone, like I mentioned earlier, about 474, 475 zone right about here in terms of support. And then the moving average about 471 and some change. Again, I'm not expecting to go lower to the 464 or 460, like I mentioned, because then the S&P would, for the most part, be dropping down. Now, we do have VIX, by the way, volatility index on the low side, and it's not climbing up. And it dropped down 4.46% today, and it's at 15.42 points. So not expecting much movement for the time being. Even though the markets are technically pointing to the downside based off MAC lines. In case you're new to the channel, MAC lines indicate if you're in bearish or bullish movement, and this is in the bearish movement currently for the time being. I believe this is a 3-month chart indicating potential movement to the downside. But again, I'm not expecting much movement for the time being, just because Fed is expecting to cut rates. Nvidia shares is expected technically to go up. It's not guaranteed though, but it's expected to be earnings. So technically there could be positive light for the upside. So I don't expect the market to be pulling down potentially for anticipation for negative movement. Basically, it would be making a decision ahead of time, and I don't expect that to happen for the market for right now. Again, this is just my opinion, so please do your own due diligence and research before buying and selling. Now, for the Dow Jones, we basically have a bunch of limits for the most part right now. Basically, we have the all-time high zone, which is, actually I should cover where we're at right now. So we're at 41,250 points, and the all-time high is give or take about 41,400 and let's say 50 points, 41,400 points, give or take, right around there. And basically we're staying within the zone, but I expect to potentially maybe hit this moving average, which is about 41,000 points. You could argue 40,950 points by the time we get to it, but essentially 41,000 points. I don't expect to go any lower than that. If we do, we'd probably come down to this zone right about here. Not zone, but this downward trend resistance line that acted as support as well. False breakouts too as well, but we bounced off it, so I'm expecting to bounce off it again, which is about, give or take, about 40,760 points, give or take. Now, it depends on when we come down to it. The longer we take, the lower the low will be. But essentially right around there, about the ballpark. Can we go lower? Obviously, we can. I don't expect to pass this higher up zone, by the way, mind you, because, again, the market would basically be deciding ahead of time. I don't expect that to happen, especially with the MAC lines pointing to the downside. But if you think this upward trend resistance line that could act as support dating back since 2021, mind you, I'll show you right now. Upward trend resistance line dating back since 2021. If you think it's going to act as support, then you're expecting the support level to be roughly about, give or take, about 40,500 points for the most part, around that zone. But that's basically it for today's video. If you found it beneficial, consider dropping a like. It does help out the channel, so thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it. And thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. Take care. God bless and peace.